Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
I hope that Christians in particular, though I think actually many folks who are not Christian would really resonate strongly with much that's in the book. But I really hope that Christians who genuinely want a interracial, diverse, multiracial faith, brother and sisterhood to be a reality, I want them to read this book. Because I believe there are many Christians who long for that and genuinely do so. And I think it's achievable.
Yeah.
I think we haven't been using the right tools. And so I want those folks to read this book because I think this book is a very hopeful book.
Yeah.
I wrote it from a place of love.
Yeah.
And what I want them to get from the book is that we can do it. I think white Christians struggle to talk about race. And I work with lots of young people, and I watch white students be terrified when we're going to talk about race. And when we start doing it, and we work with some of the histories that are in the book and some of the questions that are in the book, I watch them kind of breathe this huge sigh of relief and realize not only can they talk about race, can they own our racial history, but it's liberating to do so. It feels good to feel like you can set things right.
Yeah.
Even if that's going to be a long-term, imperfect process. I mean, we'll never fully set things right in this country. But the work of doing it is very liberating. So I hope that that's what people get out of this book.
So they don't have to live with the deep ache of feeling like something's wrong and everything you're doing isn't working.
That's right. That's right. And, and we don't have a good racial conversation in this country, mostly because white Americans and even white Christians have resisted having that conversation. So much of what in the book is not new. Black Christians have been saying it for a very long time. And in the late 1960s, said it very explicitly, said to white Christians in the late 1960s, the civil rights movement, as courageous, brilliant, incredible as it is, the vision of beloved community that it sort of put out there for Christians to embrace, it's not enough.
Yeah.
And then the late 1960s, black Christians started saying that more and more. And white Christians in the late 1960s, that's when we really stopped allying with the civil rights movement, was when black Christians started saying that. So the book really lifts up those voices. It's not my idea. It's voices that white Christians really stopped listening to in the late 1960s, who've been continuing to say, this is what needs to be done. It's actually... It's hard, but it's not that hard. It's not that hard because there's no secret about what's required. Black Christians have been telling white Christians for a very long time what's required.
Yeah.
What's hard is we have to decide we want to do it.
Yeah.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Wednesday, March 29th, 2017. So I have been told. Make sure I plug with all of the conversation, I think on Twitter yesterday, that would be Tuesday, there was, I think one of the most popular hashtags or topics of the day was April Ryan, black journalist, black reporter, and she was chided by one of The press representatives for the Trump administration, Mr. Spencer, who's a white male, he told her to stop shaking her head. That was talked about widely yesterday, and people, I think the hashtag they were using was Black Women at Work. And I said, this sounds remarkably similar to what we talk about every Thursday on workplace racism. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I think there was actually a twofer because it was April Ryan, and then Congresswoman Maxine Waters had to deal with her own workplace racism from Bill O'Reilly. But I made sure to get a plug in because we talk about those issues every Thursday. Tomorrow, workplace racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, same program time. Dial in to discuss racism on the job, what to do about it, how to counter being attacked. Now, to today's program, our guest that you heard in the audio segment that we started off with, this kind of challenge, if you will, to white Christians to honestly deal with the problem of white supremacy racism. She first came to my attention. She wrote a New York Times article, came out earlier this year, and it's titled, "Are We Raising Racists?" And that's the title of the article. And then within it, she goes on, she says, we don't talk honestly with white children about racism. They become more likely to disbelieve or discount their peers when they report experiencing racism. It goes on more detail about the importance of talking with children, particularly white children, about this problem. I reached out to her. She said she'd be willing to come on the program and share a few of her views on the problem. She is a professor of religion at Drake University in Iowa. Her areas of interest include encounters of religion and ethics with race, gender, activism, politics, spirituality, justice, and any other aspect of social life in which religiosity decides to show up. She has written extensively about white supremacy. Her 2007 publication, Whiteness and Morality, Pursuing Racial Justice Through Reparations and Sovereignty. She has a specific passage that I think is pretty direct in summing up what racism, white supremacy is. She writes, "Racism is a white problem. People who were white created white supremacy, and people who are white sustain it. Our actions, attitudes, and ways of being subvert justice, cross racial solidarity and reconciliation. More insidiously, we benefit profusely from the prevalence of racial injustice, even as we are spiritually, psychologically, and morally malformed by it." Most importantly, the next sentence says, "None of this is new." Absolutely. Joining us live on the program to discuss some of her writing and her views on white supremacy racism, our guest, Reverend Jennifer Harvey. Reverend Harvey, are you with us, ma'am?
Hello, it's good to be with you. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Wednesday evening. For our listeners, some of them, I'm sure this is their first time hearing about you. Anything that you think would be helpful for folks to know just more about who you are and the work that you do?
Well, I guess I would say I'm someone who's been journeying with these questions for a long time, and first approached them through sort of the language of faith as a justice-seeking Christian in my 20s, and now here, 20 years later, I've spent a lot of time doing various kinds of work with activism and teaching, and in my own journey now as a parent, just trying to continue to figure out what it means to be a white American and committed to dismantling white supremacy.
Wow. Have you found an answer to that question, what it means to be white?
I'm sure I'll spend the rest of my life answering that question, but I certainly feel like in the years that I've been sort of plugging away at that question, I know, some of the things that it means, and I feel clear about the ways that it means being kind of born into a society that socializes you in ways that make it difficult for you to recognize inequity, and often being socialized in ways in which you're not told the whole truth about the violence of the United States and the sort of racial history that we all inherit. And that it often means having been told that even sort of among folks who are committed to equality and long for justice, that really racism is mostly about people of color, and we even, sort of good white people sort of wanting to work on their behalf, when in fact racism is about all of us. And so, I know it means all of those things, but I've also come to know that it does not have to mean just being complicit with all of those systems, but that, that those of us who are white can learn to fight them and challenge them, and we can, it's a lifelong journey, but we can learn to know our own history differently and, seek a life-giving journey of being in solidarity against racism with men and women and children of color in this country.
For our listeners who haven't seen you, you have photographs online at your website and at the faculty page for Drake University. You are a white woman, yes?
I am, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I try to ask this question when I'm speaking with any white person about racism, particularly on this broadcast. Reverend Harvey, at any point, have you ever in your existence had trouble being honest with non-white people, particularly when talking about racism? And when I say not being honest, either withholding accurate information that you do have and or not using the most accurate terms. And that would include taking a very long time, being convoluted when you give answers so that non-white people might be confused about what you actually mean. Have you ever had a problem being dishonest in any of those ways with non-white people?
I'm sure I have, because I know that, I've had to learn and had many experiences in my life where I engaged in behaviors that were themselves racist, or where I, was trying to figure out what it meant to try and, behave in anti-racist ways. But part of my motivation was to be one of the quote unquote good white people. That's something that lots of white folks go through as they try and come out and come into a different sense of ability around racial justice work. And so I'm certain I've engaged in those behaviors. In my own growth journey.
Okay. For this program, that's one of the things that I have observed in my time conducting this broadcast and just researching on ways that white people like yourself practice white supremacy is they're not honest. There's so much rhetoric around. We need to have conversation. We need to talk about this. But most of the time, the problem is not that white people don't talk about racism. The problem is that they are very dishonest when they talk about racism, particularly with non-white people. And if on this program, if you can make every effort to be as honest as possible and efficient, because I tell non-white people all the time, we should really value our time and energy. I found that a lot of times white people will do a lot of pussyfooting, where they will talk and 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 talk. And then after you've got all these words, they didn't even answer your question. And they've talked to you for 10 minutes, and they could have said everything they needed to say in 1 minute. And we could have moved on. We have a lot of people that want to ask questions. So, and it's for me, listeners, we talked about white people laughing in these discussions. But it's important, not only because we have other people that are waiting, but this is serious. This is a serious problem, and we have been dealing with this for a long time. We should really be looking to accelerate our effort and efficiency so that we are not talking about this 10, 20, really a week down the road. Let's go ahead and get this knocked out now. To that end, on this broadcast, I have concluded the term racism and the term white supremacy, they are synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
I do think such a system exists, yes.
Accurate definition?
Yes, I think it's accurate. I would also probably add, I think that there are the definition implies sort of awareness of motive, and I think sometimes white supremacy continues and is perpetuated by folks who aren't even conscious they have the motive. But I don't think the definition is inaccurate.
Interesting. That, my view, that term, many of the white people that we've had on the program for nearly a decade now, that word conscious comes up. And as you said, it's implied because the word conscious is not in my definition. And it kind of goes back to one of your first responses, which I will have to say, I felt like you were likely practicing racism consciously, deliberately, willfully. This suggestion that white people don't know what it means to be white, that, in my view, is hogwash to the highest level. There's no way white people can be ignorant about, unconscious of racism, white supremacy, even the little white people. And I've pointed that out consistently to non-white people because I think we're the ones that are confused about this. I would even start with you as a white woman. When did you start hearing messages or any conversation about non-white people, how you should think about non-white people, behave towards non-white people? When do you remember hearing any of that growing up as a white child?
I remember it consciously from about age 6, but I'm sure I got messages before that.
Do you remember what you were hearing specifically?
I remember hearing little girls in my class talk about skin color and try and make sense about racial difference as first graders in a very multiracial school context.
What part of the country is this in?
I grew up in Colorado, in Denver.
Denver, Colorado. And what, if you recall, what was the percentage of the non-white children, black children that were in your area, your school growing up?
About 70%.
70% non-white?
Yes, correct.
Wow, okay. So in most of your classes, were you one of only a few white people?
Yes, sir.
Wow, okay. So, and your parents, did they talk about this? Was this a deliberate decision to have you in this sort of environment?
This was a deliberate decision. However, they did not talk about it until I was older.
Oh, okay. What did they tell you when you got older?
That they wanted me in a diverse school, and so they had very intentionally kept me in public schools when many white families were removing their children from schools during the era of busing and integration.
Wow.
This was a value my parents held.
Fascinating. To me, even that right there, it sounds like your parents, they're not confused about what it means to be white. And it sounds like you were not confused about that either, because you said you were getting these messages from even other white children at 6. So, which I said earlier, even the little white tykes, they're not ignorant. You're not unaware as a white person. In fact, I've stated it this way. You can feel free to set me straight if I'm saying something that's not accurate. You think, I'm giving out false information, call me on it. Listeners do that too. In my view, white people will get in trouble with other white people if they are making errors, demonstrating that maybe they don't understand or they're not aware. They're just not paying attention to what's going on, and they're not practicing upholding their duties as a racist. You will get in trouble with other white people. Is that a true statement?
I think that is part of white being raised white. Yes.
Okay.
But I disagree with you that necessarily 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds have the conceptual development to yet understand that. So I don't think I do not agree with you on that.
Okay. It's pretty young. I think there's data that says even 5. It's pretty young. That a lot of folks have said that this information is there. And I've even heard from a lot of white. In fact, there were a number of white people at the White Privilege Conference. They said that they have been practicing racism from conception. I'll leave it to you all to, make your own assessment as to where you think the awareness begins with white people. But it's much, much earlier than I think a lot of people posit. You as a white person, a white woman specifically, can you think of times specifically, because you said you're kind of on a journey in doing all this, can you think of times where you have practiced racism, even looking back on it now, saying, yeah, I was practicing racism right there. I was mistreating someone because they were not white?
I'm sorry, did you ask if I can look back at times and recognize times that I did that?
Yes, ma'am, where you have practiced racism.
Absolutely. I mean, every white person in the United States practices racism because we are breathing in racist development from birth. And so, yes, absolutely, I have.
Well, I asked for...
There's no, that would be dishonest of any white U.S. American to say that they had not.
Okay. I'm being specific incidents where you have practiced racism, not in a general sense.
Well, I can give you a specific incident from my early 20s. I can't identify. That doesn't mean I'm not claiming that they didn't happen earlier, but I can't recollect earlier times that I behaved in this way. But in my early 20s, I was again in a about 50% person of color, 50% white school, and I wanted to write a newspaper story about the Million Men March. And some of the African American men in my school, who I had friendship / student peer relationships with, had gone, and they said to me, we don't want you to write a story about this because we agreed that we're not going to talk about, the meaning of the Million Men March to us for the broader community. And instead of just respecting that and say, oh, okay, this is not my turf, I recollect sort of pressuring one of them who I had a closer friendship with and just kind of kept pestering him to talk to me about this story, which he eventually did. But, not long thereafter, I realized, wow, I just did that. I disrespected what these men of color had said to me about what their ground was relative to wanting to keep that experience, for themselves and not have it written about by a white, student to a larger, multiracial community. So, even, shortly thereafter, I recognized that was racist behavior on my part, that I just had not respected that.
Wow. Excellent. I appreciate the detail. And the reason that I ask for specifics is because frequently white people, they will use the rhetoric of white privilege to talk about the ways that they, quote unquote, benefit from white supremacy, but no one can list the ways that they practice white supremacy. And in my view, that is significantly more important than just being a white person saying that I benefit from, that's obvious. The details of
I agree with you.
How this is upheld as a white person. Can you think of any other times where you have practiced racism?
Oh, well, if you're asking me for specific incidents where I did something that was overtly racist, there was one other time on that same student newspaper experience where I was on the editorial board, and a peer of mine who was white, also on the board, wrote a satire piece that I was uncomfortable with, but I couldn't quite figure out why, which may sound insincere to some, but genuinely, I couldn't figure out why I was uncomfortable. It took me a while to figure out that I was uncomfortable because it had racism in it. But I was in a kind of, I was on the editorial board. He had put together the student newspaper, and so I went ahead and let that piece go through, even though I felt deeply uncomfortable with it. And all I did was say, take my name off of it. I want it to be clear that this wasn't written by me. Nonetheless, I allowed it to pass on through. I would say that was a moment, a very specific moment in which I engaged in racist behavior by not interrupting that and saying to that colleague, peer of mine, hey, this is not going to get published, because it was very hurtful to the whole community, but especially to African American and Latino people on campus. So, again, that's another moment where I actively participated in racism. But any of the networks in my life that have been formed because of, out of a system of white racial dominance, which so much of U.S. social structures are, then of course I'm participating in that all the time. From, sort of many of the journeys that I've had in my life, just sort of moving through. So some people call that white privilege. I agree with you. That's not a strong enough term for it. But, the newspaper specific incident I'm giving you, I can name that as explicitly racist behavior, but in terms of participating in racism, those are larger pathways throughout throughout my life, just like the life of most, maybe all U.S. Americans, right? So I have no interest in pretending that that's not the case.
Context of white supremacy. I also want to make it clear for our international listeners, when I talk about racism, white supremacy, this is a world problem, world system, not anything that is exclusive to the United States. Reverend Harvey, I wanted to ask you, there was an article that was written about, say, a year and a half ago. It was written by a non-white person, but he was talking about racism. This is in a pretty major publication where he writes, he says, white people are often sincerely and greatly pained by racism, but rarely are they pained enough. And the question I wanted to ask, you as a white woman and a professor at that, like you study, you publish books and articles on this topic from your study, your time around white people, your family, friends, do you think that the first portion of this sentence is accurate? White people, like a sizable number of white people, are often sincerely and greatly pained by racism. Is that a true statement to your experience, Reverend Harvey?
The first part, are sincerely pained by it?
Often sincerely and greatly pained by racism. Do you think that is true for a significant number of white people?
I do think a significant number of white people are sincerely pained by it. But I agree that most white people are not pained enough by it.
How do the white people who are...
Hello?
Sorry about that.
No, that's good.
The white people that you allege are sincerely and greatly pained by racism, how do they demonstrate this sincere and great pain? And it said often, too. So how do they often sincerely and greatly demonstrate this pain about racism?
Well, I mean, I guess, honestly, I feel like now we're speaking in such generalities. I'm sort of being pushed to defend something I'm not interested in defending. I know that white Americans who, for example, have named distress, sadness, horror in response to, for example, the, just in the last 2 years, not because it was new, but because it was more visible to them, the men, women, and children who've been killed by police officers, for example. I do think that I don't have numbers. I don't want to pretend to argue about numbers because I don't. But I know many white Americans who articulate and feel distress, outrage, and pain about that rampant violence.
If I'm just trying to make an assessment, right? I think racism, white supremacy is such a massive problem, and it affects such large numbers of people. I mean, we're talking billions of non-white people on the planet are being victimized by this. So you do have, in my view, it's accurate. You have to talk in general terms accurately, being truthful, but that is a part of what this is. The question that I asked in terms of white people being often sincerely and greatly pained by racism, you said that there were a number of white people who were upset, right, outraged about the police shootings and what have you. It's been my experience that when white people, when they are genuinely upset, outraged about something, they take action, whatever it happens to be. If that means that we need to spend a whole lot of money, if that means we need to mobilize troops and send them halfway around the world, whatever it is, we get it done. These police killings just keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. I have seen no sincere and great effort on the part of white people to stop this from happening. That, to me, greatly, just the fact that white supremacy still exists greatly, in my view, undermines the notion that a lot of white people are really upset about this problem. Do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree, which is what I said at the beginning. I didn't want to say a lot of white people, the generality question for me is important, which is why I said I don't want to talk about, I can't talk about numbers. I live in the world that I live in, as opposed to sort of having a grand sort of, set of data about who, and I agree with you that if a majority of white people, or if the people in power who are white were sincerely distressed, then we would have ended it the way we end many other things and mobilized all kinds of resources to end it. So I don't disagree with you.
Okay. This is one of those, in my view, where I think you could be practicing racism.
Okay.
This is one of those. Hang on one second. This is one of those instances, in my view, because I've asked a lot of white people this question over a number of years now, and we have had a sizable number of white people who have just said that statement is not true. And again, I feel like often within the system of white supremacy, people give out inaccurate information about racism, particularly about white people. And a lot of times they really minimize white people's commitment, devotion to the maintenance of white supremacy. I think that happens often. That's something that I try to really call attention to in conversations. And pointing that out for listeners, I think a good bit of that is happening even in the course of the dialogue here. The next question that I wanted to get to, and just even for listeners, because I'm sure we have some non-white people. Reverend Harvey, do you think it's logical? Do you think it makes sense for non-white people to suspect any white person, including yourself, could be racist?
Of course that makes sense. Okay. I absolutely assume. I don't know why someone who was not white or who was a person of color would ever trust a white person. That makes perfect sense to me. There's no evidence on which people of color could go that would make sense to trust white people. So I don't, and I'm not interested in making a case that people of color should trust white people at all.
Got it. Appreciate that.
That's not what I'm after in my own life. I mean,
Okay. Based on evidence, and this might be one of those where it's looking in general, but I think that is a part of racism, white supremacy. For listeners, if you do not agree, that's fine. But I think it's very important. I think particularly with individuals who classify themselves as white, I think there are clear, evident patterns in terms of their behavior, both historically and geographically. Again, this is not, a lot of these racist patterns are not anything that's exclusive to the United States. Just based on evidence and logic, should one conclude that whites collectively value white supremacy more than justice?
Yes.
Okay.
As you said before, if they didn't, we would have ended it a long time ago. I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay. I got the impression from a good bit of your work, even the audio segment at the beginning, I got the impression that can be changed, that maybe, through work, literature, conferences, conversations, white people maybe can change their values so that they value justice more than white supremacy. And I just haven't seen any evidence that that's true. Am I misreading?
Well, I don't know if you're misreading the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe white people, I don't know what evidence you're looking at. I do think there's very little evidence, but I also do believe white people can change because I have seen it and I have participated in multiracial communities where some white people do take on that work and do change and do mobilize. Quite frankly, I am not claiming it's the majority. I am not claiming it's easy. I'm not claiming that means people of color should trust them, but I do believe white people can change, and that doesn't mean we'll ever be perfect at it or ever completely disavow white supremacy. When you wake up every day in a system that sucks you back in, it's a constant fight and journey. So I'm not making any claims about that, but I do believe that white people can change, but I don't have any interest in convincing you that I'm correct and you are incorrect. I can understand why that's your perspective.
Okay. Is that a reasonable perspective to take, or am I just being a little loony here and saying I just don't see the evidence?
No, I don't think you're loony. I think that's a very reasonable perspective.
Okay.
The evidence is not largely there that white people can change, right? And though I have seen that and I have been on that journey myself, I also know that it's a very small minority when you look at the big picture, and I appreciate why as well, given the layers and layers and layers of violence and injustice and resource sort of inequity of resources and resource hoarding that whites do through white supremacy, why any person of color would not conclude that white people can change. So I think that's a reasonable perspective. That does not, I have seen it, but it's not the majority. So no, you are not. I don't think you're loony. And even if I did, that's still, your perspective makes perfect sense to me.
Speaking just for yourself, Reverend Jennifer Harvey, can you today, March 29, Wednesday, 2017, say that you have redeemed your values, your behavior, where racism, white supremacy is no longer reflected in your thoughts, speech, actions, emotional responses, where everything is in line with justice? Can you say that about yourself?
Absolutely not. I could not say that about myself. I don't think any human being 100% gets to that benchmark. There may be a few people that do, but there's nobody who is participating. I mean, I have a job. I wake up every day and go to a job that I partly have access to because of the racial violence and injustice in this country. So I would never say that I will probably never be 100%. I can say to you, I'm committed to working at it every day, and I'm committed to engaging in activism against white supremacy in a constant way in my life. But that doesn't make me good or, divested of white supremacy.
Author and professor at Drake University, Reverend Jennifer Harvey, Context of White Supremacy. Your New York Times piece, Are We Raising Racists? ? As I stated at the intro, pointing out the importance of talking to white children in particular about racism and talking to them honestly. You write, studies show that such parents are 2 to 5 times more likely, that's non-white parents. Studies show that non-white parents are 2 to 5 times more likely than whites to teach their children explicitly about race from very young ages to counter negative social messages and build a strong sense of identity. This sentence, it struck me, and you did have some data within the article to bolster these numbers. My general sense is that this is not accurate, that white people talk to their children a lot about racism directly and indirectly. We had Joe Fegan on the program years back from his book, Two-Faced Racism. He had anecdotes in the book where white children were hearing racist jokes from their family, and these were like 5-year-old, not quite 2, but close. 5-year-olds were hearing racist jokes from their white uncles and other family members, and they were going to school and repeating them, and that caused a stir. Yeah. I just see a lot of, and over a long period of time and globally, I see a lot of evidence that white children, someone has talked to them about their role as a white man, a white woman, what is going to be expected of them in the system of white supremacy. What's your response?
My response is, I agree. My sentence said, white families don't counter those negative messages. So yes, that is actually, I think that's accurate to say many white children are taught by adults and are exposed constantly to racist messaging, and that was the point of my sentence, is that parents of children of color are 2 to 5 times more likely to explicitly counter those messages, and white parents who don't want their children to be explicitly taught racism don't step in and counter that messaging. So yes, I agree with you.
No. Well, I will restate because we're not in agreement. What I'm saying, the way that your sentence is written, that that non-white parents are more likely than whites to teach their children explicitly about race, just the way that it's written right there, I do not agree with that. I think that
wait. Okay,
hang on one second. Okay. I can read the whole sentence again. That's no problem. Studies show that non-white parents are 2 to 5 times more likely than whites to teach their children explicitly about race from very young ages to counter negative social messages and build a strong sense of identity. And I'm saying I do not agree. I understand that you're saying that this is supposed to imply or suggest that non-white parents are teaching their non-white children about racism and to not participate in it, or that it's out there, it's a problem, whatever it is. And white parents don't do this. If they're talking to them directly about racism, they don't do this. And I'm saying just all of that, it's not accurate. In my view, it pushes that same notion that the problem is that white children, they're just not getting accurate information either. And I think even one of the things you said in your article, not talking to them at all. You said in your article, not talking to them at all. They're still going to be getting these messages from everywhere. And what I'm saying, again, we're minimizing. The evidence shows white parents, white uncles, white grandmothers, white aunts, they have done a lot of talking to their white offspring over the years about how to maintain white supremacy. That's obvious. And I'm just showing the pattern in your work. It's minimizing the deliberate effort that white people put into maintaining this. It's giving a way, in my view, just way inaccurate view of this, as though this can be redeemed or we just got to get correct information to them. That's what I'm saying, to be clear.
Okay. I hear you that you think I was minimizing. It's hard for me to see that because I wasn't talking about white people generally, but I hear you that you see that as minimizing.
One of our previous guests on the program, Dr. Anish, she's at the University of Albany in New York. She was here just last month. We talked about some of her work, and she specifically, I sent her your piece because there's a lot of overlap. She also does a lot of religious studies from a slightly different context, and she also does a lot of work on white supremacy. But I sent her your New York Times piece, and she said the same thing, like, wow, this has a lot of overlap with some of the work that she's done. Her response, and she has a question for you specifically, so this is her response to your article, question included. So Dr. Anish says, the obvious problem here is white people are immigrants, and not only immigrants, but hostile and unwelcome ones, and racism, white supremacy is much more than a consequence of not having conversations with our children about bad things white people did. What did George Washington and the rest of them what did George Washington and the rest of them bury their cultural legacy and accumulated material wealth with them? No, they passed it on. We must talk about who they are and what they have become in the past 500 years of global genocide, colonialism, theft, and terrorism. Clearly, Reverend Harvey sees herself as an American with little to no trouble reconciling the bad things white men like George Washington and their women did. If she had a conscience about it, then this would have been her first response to her female child. Question for Reverend Harvey. Given that racism, white supremacy is a European problem of personality born out of long traditions of violence and a lack of conscience about being violent, what more must be done to resolve their racist superiority complex than cozy conversations that will ultimately mean a yet protracted climb toward justice and peace for 90% of the world? Did you get her question at the end?
I think a lot more needs to be done than cozy conversation. I think we have to be activists. We need to be in the streets. We need to be supporting the movement for Black lives. We need to be advocating for reparations. So is that what the question is seeking to elicit in terms of my sense of things? I don't think cozy conversations will do it either. I agree with that. I don't only have cozy conversations in my life. So, I don't disagree that that's not enough. I think we have to have. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You said I think we have to have.
I think we have to have, starting from very, very, very young ages with our children, more complex, multi-layered, truthful conversations. And in addition, we need to be doing a whole host of other things to fight white supremacy. So I don't think I've ever claimed that cozy conversations would do it. I wrote one short piece. That's one snippet of my life.
I think, and again, Dr. Anish, she can certainly eloquently speak for herself, but I think she might have some of the same perspectives on your writing that I've seen, not just in this New York Times piece, but in some of your other work as well. And even your response to today that seemed to suggest strongly that white people can be redeemed. And I'm saying that entire paradigm, that entire way of thinking about racism, white supremacy, it's flawed, it's dangerous. And in my view, when I hear that from white people, that could be deliberate, willful, conscious act of white supremacy, because that's just not what we're talking about. We're talking about a group of people who have dedicated themselves to terrorizing non-white people. That's what racism is, the highest form of terrorism. I'm just saying that's two radically different ways of thinking about racism. I could be incorrect, and listeners are certainly willing to or encouraged to dial in and ask a question or let me know if, I'm not presenting things in an accurate manner. Dr. Ani, a lot of her work also, she focuses on the role of white women in maintaining white supremacy. I think she and I, one point of agreement is that a lot of times we talk about this problem and it will focus on white males. You as a white woman, can you speak to the role that white women, like yourself, play in maintaining white supremacy?
White women play a huge role in maintaining white supremacy, and I think many times, you can see this in a number of places, but one of them, one of the places that we've seen it even is in, feminist movements claiming to be about all gender equality, but continuing to perpetuate white supremacy. And so, for example, when, feminists talk about real gendered crises like sexual assault and violence against women, but don't talk about and connect, and this is something that Ann Braden used to talk about all the time, but not talking about the history of racialized violence against black men in sort of defense of white womanhood, then feminist movements perpetuate that same white supremacy within their movement. So I think white women are completely bound up in the same structures, including because white women are often plugged into family networks where wealth is being hoarded and they're playing certain kind of gatekeeper roles relative to white supremacy. So I think white women are just as complicit in this, long ancient legacy and the structures we're all living in as a result. Where Martha Washington was a person, right? She knew what was going on. She knew, was participating in, she was enslaving African people as well. She was right, she was right there. So they were both doing it.
Just because I have read one of the biographies on Ann Braden, and I remember speaking with the author, she too, in my view, suspected white supremacists, and I'm very aware of her work. And I remember pointing out specifically her making a request to put Dr. King in further jeopardy to help she and her husband maintain their house. They were having some difficulties for their work or what have you, which I just find appalling for many reasons. And the author agreed when we had her on the program. But that notwithstanding, when we're talking about white women and their role, Dr. Ani, in her tremendous work, she got me an advanced copy and everything to the mothers of white men. One of the things that is so crucial, she points out, it's often said women are the first teachers. If we're talking about a system of white terrorism where white men have gone out and done all of these savage and cruel things, raping black people and killing black people and non-white people in mass worldwide, if the first teacher is that white mother, then she is playing an extraordinary role in terms of the mindset, the mentality that has unleashed generations, centuries now, of white racists to terrorize the world. Can you speak to that, Reverend Harvey?
I think that's true. I think white women, especially in family structures in which they have done more of the parenting, when that's been the case, then it would make perfect sense to me that they're doing some of the earliest socialization of their children, right? So different family structures look differently, and different class, sort of different locations in the whole class strata might make this look different. But I don't think white women are any further away from the depth of the formation of white children, and certainly in many cases they're first on the front lines because they're oftentimes those that are raising the babies.
Oh, I can get in. And I point this out all the time when we talk about the school to prison pipeline and disparities in school suspensions and all of that. The data that I've seen, 70% of public school teachers are white women. I've said for about a year and a half now. Wouldn't that mean that white women would have to be at the center of the school to prison pipeline? Is that accurate, do you think, Reverend Harvey?
Yeah, I do, because that's the demographics, the teaching demographics in our schools, and we have this in Des Moines, and folks are, activistly trying to challenge it. But of course, if white teachers are doing the disciplining, which is getting especially African American boy children sent to bringing them into contact with police, which then ends up sending them on a course towards prison, then yeah, that is accurate.
Context of white supremacy. I want to get some of our folks who have callers. I have a few people who dialed in who have a question for you, Reverend Harvey. The number 641-715-3640, and the code is 564-943#. Press *6 if you would like to participate. I'm so glad that you brought up again that you're dialing us from Iowa this evening, only because of racism, white supremacy, and paying more attention to it and really focusing on what's happening locally, nationally, globally. I know who one of your Congress members is, Steve King, who I just wrote about. For all of the talk that you do about what white Christians need to do, your congressman, Steve King, has talked a lot about the assault that, and he never says white, what he says is Western Christian values or Western civilization, Western Christian civilization, the assault that is, he never puts it in racial terms, but I think a lot of people have said, I think he's just using, some coded language to talk about racism, white supremacy. There was an article in the New York Times today about your congressman, Steve King, and in that article, they linked to the Times Herald, which is one of your local newspapers. They had an article that just came out in the last few months. Congressman King could use nigger daily, still get reelected here. And this goes back to the point that I've made the whole time. I think the point that Dr. Aeneas raised. I just want to read this and get your thoughts since you are a fellow citizen of Iowa. In this column, it reads, King's comments are no surprise to Iowans. They aren't an aberration. King's brain blasts fly into our lives in a predictable and abhorrent landing pattern. We reinforce and second loudly. Hearing our man every 2 years as King racks up huge margins in re-election bids. When King speaks, we own his words, all of us, his supporters, and failed detractors like me. Either you backed him, 169,834 people voted for King in 2014, or you weren't good enough to beat him. Count our editorial pages on the losing team here. And then he named some other folks, the other papers in Iowa that I guess did not endorse Steve King, and he won anyway. And he says, or you don't care. And I would just add, or you're racist and you agree with the things he said. And I would add, since I just wrote about it, one of the things that Congressman Steve King has also done is endorse publicly Camp of the Saints, which is all about raping black people and invading non-white hordes coming to ruin Western Christian white civilization. Can you talk about your elected congressman, Steve King?
I find Steve King abhorrent, and I think he is shameful, and he is horrifying, and there are many, many Iowans in Iowa, myself included, who are horrified that he continues to be reelected as a representative. I don't live in his district, so he's certainly not someone I have voted for. But he gives the state of Iowa he's abhorrent. So I don't know how to disavow him any stronger than, there are not enough words to disavow what he stands for and what he teaches. And there are many Iowans of many different racial groups who agree with that. So.
And you all are on the losing team, if you do, according to the Times Herald, and in my view, again, we're missing the obvious here. For him to be, and not just elected once, this is not a fluke thing, he just wins and wins and wins and gets to contend. He said these types of things for years. Isn't that right, Reverend Harvey? It's not just a new thing, him coming out and talking, like I said, endorsing campus.
No, it's not new.
Okay. So he's done this for years and he just keeps getting reelected. That's what I mean when I say individuals like yourself, white people, you all know white people. You know the Iowans who keep electing Steve King. He keeps going out and saying these things, and the papers denounce him and talk trash, almost like what happened with the 2016 election, and he still wins. That, to me, evidences white people, we are committed to racism, white supremacy. Steve King is our guy. Get out there and tell him about campus. Say, get on those immigrants, man. Get out there and do it. Elected again. Steve, I suspect he'll win again in 2018. We'll have to pay attention to see if it happens. The folks who dialed in, we'll get some of our callers for Reverend Harvey. There are a lot of folks who dialed with a hand up, so we'll try and get folks, if you all can be efficient with your question, right to it, and that way we can hopefully get everybody. Thomas in New York, if you had a question for Reverend Harvey, you should be with us. Thomas in New York, did you have a question?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Gus. Good evening, Reverend Harvey.
Good evening.
Great. I had two questions for you. The first one is, being that you are a Christian, Reverend, in the study of theology, the speaker teacher of theology, what role in maintaining and creating and maintaining the system of racism and white supremacy does white Christianity play? Being that most of the founding fathers were Christians, and they came here and they enslaved people under the name of Christ. I just want to know, what role do you think Christianity plays in that system?
So I couldn't hear the question very well. Is there more to it than what role Christianity has played in the white supremacist system? And Gus, maybe you can tell me if you heard more clearly, if there's other parts of the question beyond that.
I thought that was the general gist of it. Yeah, what role has Christianity played in?
Okay, great. I couldn't hear very well. Okay. White Christianity has been part of, as you have said, Gus, part of the global system of European white dominance, starting with the 1400s when Europeans set sail, and so Christianity has been part and parcel of the process of displacing and committing genocide against indigenous peoples, and generated the enslavement of African peoples. So, and as that took root on this particular land base, it's been involved at every turn in support of white supremacy. White Christianity, black Christianity, not so.
But there's a difference? You see a difference between white and black Christianity?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me the difference?
Well, white Christianity, if we talk about just the 1700s and 1800s in what eventually became the United States, white Christianity was preaching and teaching that God ordained servitude for African peoples. Black Christianity was preaching and claiming that God had a plan for liberation and exodus, and that African peoples were, had inherent dignity, and that God was a God of liberation. So they couldn't be more different. I don't think there is one Christianity.
Interesting. Okay. My last question is, as it relates to the beginning clip that Gus played to you, with you talking, do you think that there's any way that white people have an honest conversation about racism, white supremacy, and be comfortable having that conversation? And I'll mute my line. Thank you.
I don't think. I think if it's an honest conversation, white people need to be uncomfortable, because discomfort usually means more truth-telling is happening. It doesn't always mean that. Sometimes discomfort is not a result of that, but discomfort often means that. And there's no way for white people to journey and grow into anti-racism and divesting ourselves from white supremacy without getting uncomfortable, very uncomfortable at for significant portions of that journey.
Right on. The person who called in, let's see, last four digits. This is wireless. I think this might be Roz. I'm struggling with the new switchboard today. See if we can get it together. 1989, caller at 1989. Did you have a question for Reverend Harvey? 1989.
Yes. Greetings, Rise. Greetings, guests. My question real quick was, especially with you being a reverend, you brought up a lot of points. I figured that one of the callers would bring it up, but you end up bringing it up. White people watching black people getting murdered, whether it's on TV, social media, or what have you. Things like Dylan Roof coming in and using that white Christianity to compel to our emotions. And you being a professor and representing that same thing that comes in right before the armies, how do you feel when you look at yourself, knowing that you represent the same thing that always starts the demise of the black community?
That I represent that as a participant in Christianity? Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, so my experience of that is that, again, there are many kinds of Christianity, and my people, yes, that is the form of white Christianity has been has absolutely played that role, and I have a lot of problems with the institution of Christianity for many, many reasons, white supremacy being one of them. And I also think, just as any part of the social system that I'm part of comes out of white supremacy, that as someone sort of identified with that institution, I'm engaged in critique and challenge and repentance and sort of a posture of I don't know quite what the right word is, but resistance to that history and the ways it still shows up in the present.
All right. Well,
okay.
Not really, but thank you anyway. I appreciate it, Gus.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Gus, I have a quick question for you, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
That's okay. My understanding was we were on for an hour. Is this is it longer than an hour?
We're 8 to 10. There are other folks who have questions. If you could spare a moment, I guess, to just get the folks who dialed in to get their quick question in, that would be appreciated.
Oh, okay. I didn't see 8 to 10. I can give you about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
I am really sorry. I did not know it was 8 till 10.
Okay, we'll see. If
I thought
it
said 15 minutes. Okay.
We'll cover as many as we can. The caller at 6361. Did you have a question for Reverend Harvey? Last 4 digits, 6361. Did you have a question, or are you just listening?
Yes. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Awesome. I have a question for the guest. Have you admitted to being a racist?
Being a what?
Racist.
Yes, I think all white people are racist. That is part of the air that we breathe. I think people are formed by the environments we're in, and we are all in a system of white supremacy. So yes.
Do you think that racism is terrorism?
I think racism can be a form of terror, yes.
How do you think that victims of terrorism should deal with their victimizers?
I would not presume to speak on that behalf. So, right.
What is the
there are many different ways. What's that?
What is the most harm that you've done personally while practicing racism as a racist?
Okay, so I've given a lot of storytelling from as authentic as I can be placed in this hour, and my understanding. So I don't. I'm going to at this point stop telling more personal stories. And if the conversation is unsatisfactory from that perspective, great. But I've told many stories and given a lot of my journey, so I'm not going to go into further storytelling about my own journey.
Understood.
In that way.
Typical.
I think.
I'll
Hang tight, Mr. Yeah, right on. Emmy, did you? Oh, she didn't have a hand up. Caller at 8162. 8162. Did you have a question for Reverend Harvey?
My question was asked. Thank you, though.
Grand. Caller at 8617. 8617. Did you have a question?
This will have to be the last one, my friend.
All right.
That's not 5 minutes. I was looking at the clock. 8617. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Greetings, Gus and Reverend Harvey. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to give a quote from a video that I saw of a sermon that you did. And one of the things that you said whiteness for now is the embodiment of an unjust material relationship, of unjust material relationships that have continued since the inception of this country. What does that mean? If you could expound on that, please. I'll take my hands offline. Thank you.
That means white people, and I do mostly think about and look at the United States, but I don't disagree, it's a global reality, are still today actively benefiting from the theft of resources, the ongoing violence against communities of color, the experience of being centered and insulated in a system that is damaging and destroying many, many communities, not just African American communities, but many communities of color. And that, for now, is what whiteness means until and unless more and more and more people who are categorized as white challenge and fight and change those realities, alongside of and in support of and behind the work and the activism that communities of color are already and have long been engaged in. That's what I mean.
Okay,
we should have 60
just
seconds.
A quick follow-up.
Hang on one second. We should have 60 seconds for a final question. We have 60 seconds?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. We'll get one more caller in. Caller in Detroit. Did you have a question for Reverend Harvey?
Yes, may I be heard? Thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
I just wanted to know, you said that you're a Christian, and Christianity, from what I believe, promotes forgiveness. Do you think that victims of racism, white supremacy should forgive white people for the mistreatment under the doctrine of Christianity? And do you promote forgiveness?
I do not promote forgiveness, especially for or on behalf of a community that I'm not part of. And I think if or when white supremacy was ended and challenged and we were in a radically different place, whether or not to forgive would be a conversation that the persons who'd been harmed and damaged and victimized by white supremacy would be their conversation, their decision to make. And I don't see within Christianity any overarching insistence on forgiveness, and I certainly don't teach that. And especially not when the violence and harm is still going on and being done.
Yeah. One more question. Can I get one more question? I know you're trying to get off.
You bet.
One more question? Okay, thank you. Who do you think is most confused about racism, white supremacy? Black people or non-white? White people or non-white people? Why? And thank you for taking my call. I'll mute myself and listen to your answer.
Thank you. I absolutely think white people are more confused about racism and white supremacy. And the people in my life who have, for whatever set of choices and reasons they wanted to, have challenged and taught and nudged me along have been people of color, because they, in my experience, have been the people that understand and have the accurate, deep understanding and knowledge of racism and white supremacy. And I have learned the most from those people in my life who have been willing to put in the time pushing me along, even when it was sometimes uncomfortable. So white people are far more confused.
And the whole point of all of this hinges on whether or not that is true. And just to make sure I leave no doubt in my stance, unequivocally, Gus T Renegade says that is false. White people are the experts. White people like Professor Reverend Jennifer Harvey are the experts on white supremacy, what it is, how it works. No contest. Like, either that's true or it's not. And that is where we will wrap things. If I could make a request as you depart, since you are at Drake University, I do a lot of research. It would be helpful if you could get me access just so I can go online and research, because they have a lot of, white people have a lot of information that they have digitized and just great resources. It would be great to access. Is that something that you'd be willing to work on so that I can just go online and look at, the books and different research projects and what have you that related to racism?
I have no idea if I could make that happen. I don't know that I have any power able, in order to make that happen. But I know that the databases they have. I'm not. I can't in good faith answer that question on the air because I don't know if that would even be possible. But
you could inquire.
You
could inquire to see if it's possible, right?
I would be happy to inquire.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that something you're willing to do? Is that something that
sure.
you will do? Okay.
I'll inquire for you, sure.
Thank you. Grand having you on the program.
Thank you so much for your time.
For sure. Reverend Jennifer Harvey, have a grand evening.
You do the same.
Mm-hmm. Context of white supremacy. I asked Melissa Stein. She was on the program, if folks remember, last spring. I think it was last May. She was on the program, and we talked about her book, Measuring Manhood. If folks recall, I asked her if she'd be down to do the same thing so that I could get university access. I can just go to the University of Washington. It is very close, but I mean, I would prefer to just remain in my rocking chair on the front porch and just go online and get whatever I need, as opposed to having to go down the block to the library. But at any rate, Melissa Stein, she did not secure the access. She did get me a few files, but she did not get the access. White woman, race soldier. What can you say? One thing that I will say sparked my memory, because so many white people have said that over the years, that white people are more confused about racism, white supremacy. I think it ties, at least to me, it relates very much to the notion that we are not victims. At least I know I have experienced a lot of black people and a lot of non-white people in total who are just repulsed by the term victim, or thinking of themselves as a victim of racism. I think it's very much in the same line with this nonsense about white people being ignorant about race. Almost like white people are the victims of racism because they're so stupid that they don't know what's going on. But it reminded me, there was this amazing report that I heard with Mr. Fuller when he says, try to learn something about everything. I listened to this program just on the basis of technology. Like, I've been wanting for the entire year to do a program just to talk about how technology is impacting racism, white supremacy. It's advancing so quickly. I mean, it's rapidly changing how things operate in the world. I think I had mentioned it previously just about fences. People saw Fences, right? Viola Davis, right? She won an Academy Award, I think, for her role. But Denzel Washington, he's a sanitation worker, and they had 3 sanitation workers on the truck. This is, I think, like 1950s, 1960s, Pittsburgh. And I said, wow, just in 50 years' time, now it's 1 person. And very soon, it's going to be 0. This sparked a lengthy dialogue that I've had with a non-white listener about how soon driverless cars are going to just be the norm, where that's just, everybody has a driverless or has access, is regularly in a driverless car. And I said 25 years. That was what I put on it. I said I think about 25 years, that's what it's going to be. But I mean, it's rapid. Like even Black Mirror, that was one of the things that also I paid attention to in watching that series. We talked about it with Dr. Martin Kevorkian, is technology. But that's something that I've really been trying to pay more attention to with a counter-racist lens. But there was this great report on The Guardian, and they were talking about how technology gets people addicted, right, to just using apps. They were talking about a variety of different games that apply to counter-racism. I will see if I can share. I did not plan to play this today, so it might take me a second or two to figure out the exact spot in the clip where it is for people listening live, but I think it'll be worth it. In the meantime, if people have commentary that they would like to share based on the performance from Reverend Jennifer Harvey, we will certainly make time if you want to get any thoughts in. I think there were a few people that we missed. I tried to get as many folks in as possible. I will say, for the record, I did not say that the program was 8 to 9 in the email. I just said the program is 8 p.m. Eastern or Central, whatever her time. I think she might even be in Central, so for her it would have been 7 p.m. But at any rate, I did not say 8 to 9 on the email. For folks who dialed in, I will try to get people that might not have been able to ask a question at all. Just, if you want to share, sorry she was not able to stay longer, but if you want to share what your question was going to be, or if you just want to share your observation, I'll try and see if we can get the people who didn't get to comment at all. 3246, did we miss you completely? Did you not get to share at all? Last 4 digits, 3246. Oh, try again. It's not. Oh, there it is. Oh, it did not. I thought I got it, and it did not. Let's see. I'm not sure why it's not unmuting. I'm tapping your line to open up your line so that you can speak. Let me try somebody else's line to see if it's a general problem. The caller. How interesting. Seems this one is not working either. I will refresh my page and then I'll try to get the people who have not been able to share at all.
Hello?
Yes, hello, can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Greetings, Gus. Oh. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Greetings, Gus. I just wanted to say, it's just typical, like once that pressure starts to build, they always pretend that, I guess, they didn't get the proper email of how lengthy the show is going to be. And it's just the thing that I always hear, we're the smartest people when it comes to that area, but other than that, we hadn't built anything, we hadn't accomplished anything, we're the dumbest people on the planet, and we're inferior, X, Y, Z. And I find that to be very, very interesting. Every time they say we're the experts in that one area that they actually control. But, I mean, it's just standard practice. I don't expect anything other than
Right on. Anybody else that we missed completely who did not get to ask a question? Any other folks that we missed completely who didn't get to ask a question? Perhaps no. Okay. Other folks who died.
Yes, can I be heard?
Yes, sir. We can hear you. Yes, sir.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Oh, I can't be heard. Okay. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. Greetings, everyone. Yes, I listened to most of the program, and one thing I noticed about white people when they come on this program, because it is more in depth in its relationships with white people, and that white person, and of course I agree with white people being the experts on racism. They quickly understand, well, this is not
muted
a group of niggas who are talking about racism, white supremacy. And she got well ahead of the atmosphere in the program, and immediately stated that it is out of bounds.
Unmuted.
Talk about her, and I find that as a definite act of racism, white supremacy, because a white person has to entertain a conversation about themselves personally and be asked the most intrinsic questions about themselves. As non-white people, we should not be rejected from asking white people as a collective and white people personally about their personal selves in regards to the global system of racism, white supremacy. And I noticed that in a lot of cases when a white person comes on, because we are searching in this quest. We're searching for honesty. So how else can you gain anything from the subject in a person of honesty and a person don't want to talk about themselves? They may indict some examples of white people as a collective about practicing racism, that sort of thing. And for the most part, that satisfies most non-white people. But when the subject matter is turned to them personally, it's what's much more important, in my opinion. And for the most part, they either don't want to engage into it or lie about it. And I find it very interesting. And that's what I have to say for right now. Thank you.
Context of white supremacy. Appreciate that, retired firefighter. Are there other folks who had commentary? I think we may have got. Yes, ma'am.
Can I be
You're
heard?
breaking up a lot, Gus. You're breaking up a lot.
He is. Okay. Greeting, everybody. This is Amini. Unfortunately, I did not catch the juicy parts of this conversation. I came in much towards the end as she seemed like she was getting frustrated or so-called offended and left. Now, because I didn't hear all that she said, but I was able to hear the way that she got off the phone and that she wasn't open to staying. I know that she is a reverend and she is a professor. She holds a doctorate degree from some place in something. And I always think that it's so interesting that, and it's why the case has to be maintained that white people are not committed to replacing the system of racism, white supremacy, because they're actually really not willing to do anything, even if that is, and I'll feel the exact same way as Mr. Firefighter who just spoke before me, willing to give anything. Like even if the email said an hour, and Gus is saying, hey, I have people on the line who want to ask you questions, being able to just say, well, you know what, I'll just hold off on my dinner and I'm going to stay and answer these questions because these black people seem like they really, are about this. Just being able to do that And for me, it's so telling, because all white people, it's really, I agree. I think Gus wrote something not too long ago that eventually everything on TV is pretty much just going to be some type of race drama. And I think so. I think it's just like extremely trendy for everybody. Black Lives Matter. Oh, yeah, let's do this. You know what I mean? But when it comes down to actually being constructive in any way, shape, or form, there's always some level of offensiveness. I mean, I don't even want to make a metaphor, but I don't see in any environment or situation where someone is called to speak on something that they said that they want to speak on, and then the people who are tuned in on their free time to listen to this person speak and have the opportunity to ask tough questions, all of a sudden, well, I don't have the time, or I don't want to, I've divulged enough information. I mean, I can understand wanting to have, like, feeling like there's some type of, like, privacy or whatever, but nobody just asked her, share her, sexual escapades or her sexual life or something like that, outside of if she's had sex with someone who's non-white, you know what I mean? But that's just for our purposes so that we can understand a little bit more. And I'm going to listen back and take notes, and perhaps this Saturday, like, say something else if she said something that really stuck out to me. But just from her tone and everything, it's so typically white. And I wonder, like, I mean, it's amazing, because if you only listen to one, for anyone who might have just tuned in for, like, the first time ever, when you only listen to one, it's so easy to excuse. But when you listen to white women do the same thing, the same way, every time, at about the get offended by the same thing, it's really, really, really interesting. I mean, that's the kind of thing that leads to scientific deductions, like formulations of theories, is when you observe such a strict pattern of behavior, a strict response. Is like, wow, you know what I mean? You don't even deviate. Like, this is just what it is. And I'm always fascinated by that, because it's so obvious. If she cried, that would have been interesting. I don't know if she did or didn't, but like I said, I will listen when the show becomes, or the broadcast becomes archived. And I mean, and here's another thing, like, when white people want to say that white people are the most confused, I mean, at first it might seem like maybe that might be so, but it's impossible. It's impossible to set up a system that you're confused about. And so, I mean, that's just logic. And it gets to the point that the logic is so plain, so simple, so clear, that it's blasphemous and disrespectful to even act like that's not logical. How do you set up a system I'm a victim of, but I'm supposed to know more about it than you just because I get victimized by it? Who's victimizing me? If it, you know what I'm saying? Only white people. So who knows how this goes? I mean, it's fascinating. So, I mean, I didn't even have to hear everything to know that she did what white women do when they come on here. I mean, I argue the white males do it too, but the white women, God, like, if you just listen to the whole show, you'll forget which one you're listening to, because they do the same thing every time. So, anyway, thank you all for listening.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this is Ken Steele, and I just wanted to say that if I had been allowed to continue my inquiry, we would have definitely seen an episode of Lacrimation on another episode of the context of white supremacy. I guarantee it. I've been breaking racist white women since elementary school, and this is just light work. But what I will say is, I think Emmy's observations are on point. She's very, very typical, and if you listen back on the recording, that was the comment that I made that she spoke over. It's interesting that suspected racists know exactly what to do with terrorists. They have all sorts of machinations of what you do with criminals, all sorts of ideas what you do with a rapist or a killer or a murderer. But when you get to racism, they suddenly have no idea how to deal with a racist properly. They have no idea how a victim of racism should deal with a racist. And I've heard racists on a number of occasions remarked, well, if I were black, I would, if we were in a situation with that black people find themselves in, we wouldn't take it. We would organize, we would fight against it, and we would overcome. And that's what they all believe about themselves. But when it comes to us, in their mind, we are supposed to be where we are. We are supposed to be in this system of white supremacy, and anything else is unimaginable, unfathomable, and they don't even want to entertain it. They get frustrated and offended at the idea of even addressing that. And I will mute my line at this time.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
That's a very good show, Gus. Always love to have white people come on. She wasn't the most refined white person. However, I think she came on expecting a certain type of show, and didn't quite go that way from the start. I think you kind of jumped in and you said, you like when white people don't use a lot of words, and that kind of eliminated a lot of what she planned on doing. And, you then said something about the laughter, and she quickly swallowed her chuckle and knew she couldn't do that either. So she felt very uncomfortable, and I took it, she was getting very defensive. Just that white woman attitude type of thing. It was sort of like, well, what does she want me to say? That's what I got from her. I think that question that she still asked was great. I would love to, maybe next time we have a white guest, I would like to ask what do you think that white people would do if they were in this situation? How would they handle this? Maybe we'll get some truth. Maybe we'll get some real solutions, because I can't see them being in this situation for too long without some type of things going down. I would love to see how they would handle it and hear that from the guests. Just thought that was very interesting. The part you talked about earlier with the news reporter, I didn't see that until today. He told her to stop shaking her head. I fell on the floor. I love this Trump administration. I think these are the best group of characters you could put in there. I'm just waiting for things to hit the fan for black people and see how they handle that and see how black people respond to that. That's what I'm waiting for. But I think another thing that you talked about, I can't wait for your show on technology, because, technology is one of those things that's advancing. The technology is being programmed to be racist. And also, technology in a huge part is our replacement. Prior to the modern technology, they had black people to do all these things. So it's very interesting to have that show and fit it in the context of white supremacy, because there's a lot of shows and talk about technology, but it's not spoken about in the context that it should be spoken about. Other than that, I'll mute my line. I'm on my way to Plantation. Have a nice evening.
Can I be heard really quick?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, for the female caller who got to ask the last question, I think that was a very stellar question. If she feels that black people should forgive white people, even though she's a Christian. And I say that because I just had to write a response about an article in Psychology about forgiveness. And I completely wrote it from the framework of the larger context of racism and white supremacy, not individual wrongs that are done. And I think that's stellar, because white people push black people to forgive. But any other kind of atrocity, white people have yet to forgive who they're blaming for 9/11. But, you know what I mean? But we, for this grave atrocity, we can't even wrap our minds really around all that happened to us in that time. We're just supposed to forgive them for all that then and all that they're doing now. So, and a lot of white people say that we should get over it. They have a whole bunch of different ways of saying it, but I do appreciate having a white woman say no, and all the other white people that perhaps have said that on the line. But but the question was good. I just wanted to say that because I do appreciate that. So thank you for that. That's it. Thanks.
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
I thought it was pretty tacky in the supposed miscommunication about the length of the show from the guest that you had. To me, as a non-white person, she contradicted a lot of what she was trying to say. And if she was a professor of religion, her response to the listener who asked what the difference between a black and white Christian was, she was very short, and she seemed ready to get off the phone. I think if she was committed to bringing justice for non-white people, it's interesting how quickly she was ready to get off the phone. I was hoping she could have stayed longer because I'm over here taking notes, and it was barely an hour into the show, and she brought it up. I probably would have formulated some more questions for her, but the questions that the listeners were able to ask her were very telling. Even from her interview was very telling. Also, what she said at the end, I kind of chuckled at her response to the listener's last question about who's more confused, white or non-white people. I felt like she was very much obviously practicing racism and kind of just left it like that, like, bye niggers. So, great show, good interview. Thanks for listening.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's Mark in North Carolina, and I saw the quote. Actually, the quote that I read was from her YouTube video. She did a sermon in 2015, and I thought that it was really interesting that the quote, in the quote that I read, in the context that she stated it in, she didn't mention anything in terms of, the rape and the murder that persists to this very day, and that we expect to continue, given the history of white people and white people not being ready to do anything to produce justice. So the quote was, "Whiteness for now is the embodiment of an unjust material relationship, that have continued since the inception of this country." That to me sounds like refinement of the word, white privilege, quote unquote.
I thought it was important as well, just because I was on Twitter, of all places. I think people who listen long enough know I absolutely loathe Twitter. But someone messaged me, I think it was Talib Kweli, he's a hip-hop artist, and how I found out about 2000 Seasons, the book. He was writing about racism, and he said, he mentioned this race soldier's work. I'm not even going to say her name, but he mentions this race soldier's work. And she's prominently known, not quite as known as C.O.W.S, but pretty prominently known. And I said, she's a racist too. I cite white authors, but my writing, even at Atlanta Black Star, I will cite white authors and say admitted racist, suspected racist. Like, even if I am going to use some of their work, I'm not going to present them like this is some cool white person and they get it, like, right on, who Timothy don't drink the Kool-Aid wise. And so I posted that, and the person wrote back, and they said that this white person who Talib Kweli cited, they admitted to being a racist. And so they shared the clip. What this white person did was say that all white people are racist. They didn't say, yes, I, such and such and such and such, am a racist. And I said, that is a key in my view. That is a significant difference. And our guest today, Reverend Harvey, she did the same thing. When the question was asked, I think that was Mr. Steele, are you a racist? She said, all white people are racist. Just in my view, that is very different from saying, I, me, am culpable, I am a racist, and leaving it at that, not just, all white people are racist. That kind of shifts the focus away from that individual white person. And whites, they find a lot of different ways of doing that, deflecting attention from them individually.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention one more thing here if I can, Gus.
Yes, sir.
The other thing is that in her book, I read an excerpt for the introduction, part of the introduction in her book, that I can't think of the title of the book right now, but she's a self-proclaimed feminist. And I found it really interesting that when the question was asked about white women's role in the system of white supremacy and the refinement and the upkeep of white supremacy, she mentioned the feminism movement and how it gives this impression that the feminists are about X, Y, and Z, but really it's more so about continuing and expanding the system of white supremacy. But that's not mentioned in her book. She's a self-proclaimed feminist. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think that she was definitely practicing racism, white supremacy on this program this evening. Thank you.
Right on. One of our listeners in the great state of Wisconsin, they wrote in, their question was going to be, is it logical for blacks to want to reconcile with whites? Why do you think that blacks would want to reconcile with terrorists? Was your book written as a way to help whites refine racism so that they can continue practicing racism and continue to terrorize non-white people? Those are going to be her 3 questions if she had stayed longer. For the folks that were listening, I think we did get disconnected. Our internet connection dropped, but we got reconnected. If you were listening, I guess at TuneIn or Black Talk Radio Network, if you refresh your browser, it should be working fine, no problems. Other folks, did they have commentary?
Can I ask a question?
For sure.
Yes. To everybody, I only saw one picture of her, and what struck me when I looked at the picture, it appeared that she was very white male masculine looking, and so I was going to get on the path of sex between, anti-sex in this case, between white people and non-white people. That is called lesbianism and whatnot, that sort of thing. Did anybody notice the same thing, or is it just me? Because others may have saw different pictures of her. I actually heard some of the listeners saying that they saw her on YouTube, but I only got that one picture. She looked very masculine to me.
Hello.
Just comments on that.
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you as well.
Hi. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I thought that too. And she, from what I read a little bit more. She's I guess active in the lesbian community there. I looked up. You have to keep going because, like you said, I saw the picture and. You don't want to judge, whatever, but you look at the picture. And I did look. So that would have been a good question to ask about the anti-sexual thing, because according to what I read, she had a blog. It said how she went to something in Iowa, her first lesbian outing or something, and how she offended the people there because she was from New York. And New York, I don't know. I guess New York lesbians are different. I don't know. And the use of the word queer and stuff like that. So, yes.
Now I better understand on why she quickly got off this program. That also is a supportive reason on why she quickly got off this program. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hello?
Just wanted to add to that really quickly. What I would say is that she does have a very masculine look about herself, and I think the YouTube video that I did watch, she was at a church of utilitarianism or something to that effect. It's one of those churches that, and I could be wrong, but I've seen them frequently have people in alternative or quote unquote alternative sexual lifestyles being members in that church, and that's pretty much who they reach to as people who embrace alternative lifestyles, quote-unquote homosexual, anti-sexual, whatever you want to phrase it as. That's typically what I've seen in my experience. And she has, the piercings in the lip lip piercing, I think a tongue piercing, so on and so forth. And so very, very masculine, if you will, lesbian look to herself. Thank you.
That is a very dangerous white woman. I can hear you.
Oh yeah, I'm glad y'all said that because I was thinking Area 8, because she had alluded to the Million Man March thing and saying how that she had one of the black guys she was very close to. She was able to persuade him to tell her some information. So I was thinking, I bet she was in a relationship with him, and I meant to ask that question. But now that you guys are describing the picture, it could be an area 8.5 or something like that, you know?
I thought that too from the pictures and the YouTube videos, at least the ones that I saw. She looked, it was a similar presentation, more of a kind of masculine presentation. I even thought, I was wondering if that was her biological child or if it was adoption, or yes, I was curious about that too.
Can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, sir. Greetings to you, the hosts, the callers, and the listeners. I was going to ask the person who came in to speak with us, the individual who classifies as white. I was going to ask a few questions. One of the questions I was going to ask was people, or if people who classify as white come to America, invade America, and genocide the black people, then why are you here in America as a part of the invasion? And maybe that's a loaded question, but she did say herself that in 1400, since 1400, white people went out of Europe, invaded indigenous people's land and genocide them. But my point is, but why are you still here as part of the invasion? And why do you keep having children and making them be part of the invasion? If you have children on invaded land, that makes your children part of the invasion and you part of the invasion. So I'm just wondering, you have enough money to leave. Are you not allowed to leave? Did somebody tell you you cannot leave this land, that you have to stay here? And do they tell other white people that they have to stay here? Are they allowed to go back to Europe? Are they allowed to leave South Africa and go back to Europe? Are they allowed to leave the other places in the world? Maybe they're not allowed to. And I was wondering if she could get that answer. And then the other question I had was that, are the black people in America, are the majority of us the Native Americans? Because a lot of people have told me that's the case. Even my grandmother told me that's the case. So I was going to ask her, what percentage of us are Native Americans? What percentage of the black people currently in America are the Native Americans? What percentage of us came from Africa? Because she would know because they have all the records. And then I noticed in the very beginning that she chuckled, in the very beginning when she was giving her introduction of what she did. She said, she does this, and she works to, and then she chuckled, and then she said, dismantle white supremacy. And I thought that was interesting. And I wanted to ask, if that meant anything to her, maybe if she, looking back on it, could tell us what she was thinking at that time when she was laughed about. She may be dismantling white supremacy. And then the last thing that I wanted to say, and I wasn't sure if I should say it or not, but the last thing that I noticed, because I sent the email, because I figured she was leaving. And I sent the email, but then when I looked back at the email that I sent Mr. Gus, I wanted to ask the question. I looked at the email, and it said 911. So the time was 911. That was the time, PM, of the email. That was the exact time that she left. And one of the lady callers, black lady callers, just today mentioned something about 911. I'm wondering if she noticed the same thing, consciously or subconsciously. And I thought that was particular because maybe this person is a part of a high order. And maybe she could have told us that. Are you like one of those people that they say are Masons or something? Are you part of any other type of secret society? So those were my questions. It was just interesting that I wasn't able to get through when I was trying to speak to you. So, okay, thank you.
Interesting. Wow. Other folk, did we miss anybody? Anybody else have observations that they wanted to get in based on what they heard from Reverend Harvey? Make sure I'm looking at the switchboard to make sure I didn't miss anybody's hand. She included, I did miss a hand, maybe. Other folks, anybody else that I missed who had a hand up? Okay. She used a metaphor once when I think it was Mr. Steele, when he asked if she was racist, and she said all white people are racist. She said it's in the air metaphor. And that's one of those where I say it's crucial because whites, and that was where when people were asking about, you individually, can you, tell us times where you've practiced racism, or can you, tell us a time that you did the most harm practicing racism, where she got all defensive and, hey, this is I'm not going to talk about my personal life. That is just concealing information, which is one of the main ways that white people practice racism, white supremacy, them being more informed about white supremacy, racism, concealing information. And they do this in a variety of ways to play the victim, that you all are berating me and harassing me and trying to comb through, all the details of my life. No, just what are some of the ways that you practiced racism? You have admitted to being a racist. She admitted to being a racist even at the beginning of the program when she said she was still trying to figure out what it meant to be white. That I think was in like the first 3 minutes of her opening her mouth on the program, I think. She said she was still trying to figure it out. And that when a white person says that sort of comment to me, that lets me know that this person is going to be engaged in a lot of folly, that they, are just going to be saying all kinds of nonsense, that this is a really dangerous white person you have to be on your guard about. White people are not confused about racism. They're not trying to figure out what it means to be white. What it means is to practice white supremacy, terrorize black people. Dylan Roof, Margaret Sanger, whatever image you need of white people. I have said consistently, it should be a white woman with cookies and an apron. That's what you should think of. And in fact, if you saw Imperium, I fell out laughing like this movie came out. It's specifically about white supremacy and allegedly the FBI going in to try to get these terrorists, but they have a scene where it is a white woman. She's in this white nationalist family and they're plotting about how to get a bomb and blow up non-white people. She's baking cookies. She doesn't have a Klan outfit. She doesn't have a shaved skull. She doesn't have a swastika tattooed on her forehead. She is baking cookies. Now, I do think the cookies had swastikas, but that's, beside the point. That's what you should be thinking of. That is Reverend Harvey, white woman with earrings and a business suit. She's a reverend. That's what you should be thinking of when they are doing major damage. But a white person coming and saying that they don't know what it means to be white, and they've come in and hanging out with the coloreds. That's how they figured everything out. You all have taught me that right there is racism, white supremacy, and a very, very dangerous racist. She admitted to being a racist, so a very dangerous race soldier, in my opinion, religion of white supremacy. Everybody good?
Can I say something real quick?
For sure.
Awesome. I thought it was really, really telling how. Wait just a second. I thought it was very telling how terse she was in her response to my direct questioning. And I thought that one thing that I've noticed about racist white supremacists is that they can't stand having straight questions asked of them. They can't stand to give straight answers. They think that they are beneath, that is beneath them to even entertain these questions. And I thought that that was the general tone that she took, particularly once the direct questioning started.
Yeah, I would agree. It's been my experience. They very much, it's number one, I want to come in and I'm one of the good white. I think she said that from the very beginning. You're not suspicious of me. I understand, bro. You all are mistreated, right. I read, I was at the white privilege conference. They'll come with that. And or they will indict white people, but it's not me. They'll do a lot of obfuscating and finding ways to talk about other white people, or it's in the air. They'll give you that metaphor which she used today, but not talking directly about how they practice racism. And I think she did agree on that when I said that white people, they'll pile up ways that they benefit. They will not talk about ways that they practice racism. And that's the crux of everything. Anybody else?
Oh, a quick question. Did she say examples of how she directly practiced racism, or did she just lie to me?
She gave 2 examples earlier in the program, maybe within the first 30 minutes. I don't remember the exact. It was early in the program. She gave 2 examples of where I think one of them, a caller mentioned already, where it was some black people. They went to the Million Man March. She said this was while she was in college. Went to the Million Man March, and I guess the black males had agreed that they were not going to talk about their experience, and she was working for the newspaper, and so she was going to write about this. And I guess she said she knew one of the black men. She was friends, I think was the word she used, and she pressured him to break his promise to not discuss. And he told her about all this so she could do her story. That was one. And then the other one she said was some white person on the newspaper staff wrote an article with some racist commentary in it, basically, or that she thought was racist. And she said that she just got her name taken off of it, but she could have stopped that from being published altogether. And she said that she also thought that that was an act of racism because she knew it was racist and she didn't do anything about it. And she had the ability to have stopped that, and she didn't. So those were 2 that she listed. And again, white people, hey, practicing racism is not, that right there is a major part of the problem. White people not explaining, non-white people not understanding all of the different ways that white people practice racism, white supremacy. That's something that they should be able to talk about, for as much time as they spend whining and running off at the mouth about white privilege and all the different ways that they benefit and band-aids and not being followed. They should be able to talk for eons and fill up all the hard drives in the world with the ways that they practice racism, because that is what non-white people, including Gus T, that is what we do not understand, obviously, or we would have solved this problem. That's just following logic. Anything else folks wanted to get to? I assume folks are good on Reverend Harvey. I did think it was important as well. Steve King, her congressman, as I said, that was in the New York Times. I don't know if it's in the physical paper, but it was on their website today, where they were talking about his whole history of practicing racism. And he keeps getting, and they had to get that in. Now, they allege that maybe the tide is turning and people are tired of his antics, but they had to concede he's been doing this for a while. All of his referencing the book Camp of the Saints and he endorsed Donald Trump, making disparaging comments about immigrants and the demise of Western, i.e. white civilization. He's been doing this for a long time, and he just keeps winning and keeps winning. They just keep sending him back to Washington on behalf of Iowa. Folks like the good Reverend Jennifer Harvey. They, in that report, well, he said all of these things and people have done all of this. Apparently there's a significant segment of Iowa that this is our dude. He speaks for us. That right there is huge. When we see these type of things, we need to take that for what it is, following logic. And that's why I said when you hear somebody like a Reverend Harvey suggesting that white people, if they just get accurate information, if white children, if we just, talk to them correctly at a young age, white people are more confused about racism, me being able to talk with you all, I have learned more about. No, if anything, I'm refining how to practice racism, white supremacy, so I can better confuse non-white people so they will not be suspicious of me as a racist, and just giving non-white people inaccurate information. That's one of the main things. I really try to emphasize that white people promoting false information, master deceivers, and efficiently where they can get non-white people to accept their false information. Major strategy of racism. With that, I think I might have the sound clip. I'm trying to decide if I want to play it today or wait, because the program is coming. I was going to do it last week right with the South by Southwest conference down in Austin, because they had a lot of, I think they had the documentary on Michael Brown that just came out, where they were saying that maybe it was not a convenience store robbery and all this. I think that was screened at South by Southwest, and obviously they had a lot of information on technology. It was it was worthy of a broadcast. Just seeing some of the new designs and technology that they were talking about there, and in general, it's incredible. I'll have to think for a second or two about whether I want to play the sound clip that I was talking about today or just save it for the technology program that is coming. But if we have any listeners, I think I asked before, if we have any listeners who participated in the South by Southwest conference over the past week or so earlier this month, definitely drop me an email. Would be great to hear, what you saw, what was there. I know we have a lot of listeners down in the Texas area, or people who might just, went to hang out. Drop me an email. Would be great to hear your thoughts. Any other topics while I'm trying to decide if I'm going to play this or not? Any other topics or observations, suggestions folks wanted to get in?
Hello.
We'll get.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Right on.
Oh, thank you so much. One question I wanted to ask. I was indisposed, so I couldn't, but I was listening. I guess one of her books, because I guess she's an expert, because she's read like 3 books on this kind of thing, and she's recommending reparations. And I guess one of the examples was that a church should have 20% African American people. And I did want to ask her, well, how would that help just being around black people? White people have been around black people have been around white people for years. So I don't understand how that would be a form of reparations, and also the financial impact of that, knowing that most of the money generated in the black community is through the black church with black people. And why would you want the African Americans to take their money and tie it to your church? And will that church also in turn give 20% of their tithes and offerings to the community? That was long, but that was a question I had based on what I read on her reviews and about the book. And I guess kind of outside of this, a potential guest, I don't know, I think everybody's probably heard of him. I'm probably late. Some guy who's white, his name is DJ Vlad, and he talks to all these black people in hip hop, and he's in all this information, and I'm sure he's getting a lot of YouTube hits and money from that. And that's a person that I think will be a good guest on the show, because I just don't get why he's so into black people. I mean, all black people, hip hop, non-hip hop, black people. He just seems to be really into black people, and I don't know why.
I am aware of him. I have to see about having him as a guest. He seems like another one of those people, delectable Negro, making a lifestyle out of consuming black folks. Was there, appreciate the suggestion for DJ Vlad, was there a male caller who spoke up simultaneously?
Yes, sir. Just wanted to say that in Mr. Fuller's revised, expanded edition, the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, counter-racist code book. He has some very interesting and intrinsic questions that should be asked to white people, and I've studied them, and I would say that it'd be great to be able to ask white people these questions. Well, I mean, yes, I mean one can make up their own questions, that's for sure. But some of the ones that Mr. Fuller thought of are very intrinsic, very interesting, and it really would help a non-white person to be able to listen to that white person, what they have to say in the exchange, to be able to reveal much more clearer about how white people practice racism, white supremacy. It's in the People Activity of Politics from page something like page 219 to page from 219 to page 223. Full of questions, a whole lot of questions, very interesting questions, and yes, I was prepared to ask her some of those questions based on just off the picture that I observed of her, and people have a reason for looking a certain way. They have a reason for looking a certain way, and from what I heard from the listeners, that also was thinking the same way that I was, and we haven't talked to each other about it. I was prepared to really ask her some intrinsic questions. But yeah, just my observation and just to observe not Dr. Wilson, but Mr. Fuller's book and the questions that he has that we should be asking white people. Thank you.
Right on. Any other comments folks wanted to get in? Observations? Doesn't necessarily have to be related to Reverend Harvey. Folks satisfied? We'll assume folks are good. I'm thinking just because the technology program, like I said, I've been talking about this for a while. I've been thinking about it, and I think I've posted. I think I have not brought it up as frequently on the program, but I definitely have been paying attention to it. In fact, I think it was. They do they have all of the end of the year programs, even though the C.O.W.S did not do our review for 2016, but they have lots of reviews for 2016 and what, people are expecting for the coming year. And NPR, they had a segment. This was, it might have been like January 1st. It was very, very early in the year. And they were talking about all the technological advances, things that they were looking forward to in the coming calendar year, this year, 2017. And I'm paying attention like, wow, that's crazy. Like, listen to all the different things. And they said, one of the things, it was like a collective of people. One of the people, she said, I am looking forward to, in this year, them having virtual reality technology where two people, you could be in two different locations. Like, you could both be at your separate houses, and you could go on a date, quote unquote, from your two separate houses, and it would be realistic, lots of fun. They even in what they call a tongue-in-cheek manner suggested that, you could engage in some sort of virtual reality, sexual play or what have you with all of this. And they were saying that this is going to be available this year, in addition to the driverless car technology taking off. And I mean, just massive changes in the way things operate, in addition to things being a lot cheaper. Like I said, some of the products that they had at South by Southwest, it is mind-boggling just trying to fathom what the world will look like. That's one of the things I think that is important for counter-racism as well. Racists, they look 1,000 years down the road. That's what Iowa Congressman Steve King is doing. I'm looking 500 years down the road, and I want to make sure that individuals classified as white dominate. Looking at this technology, what is this going to look like 100 years down the road? What are the implications with regards to racism, white supremacy, counter-racism with these technological advances over the next 25 years, the next 50 years? I would say even for a lot of us in our lifetime, it's going to be a radical change just with the amount of development and technology, and particularly it could be especially bad, I think, if you think about this in the context of education, who has access to a lot of this technology, who understands how it's put together, who's going to be on the front lines, as they say, in development and all of that. I mean, it could, man, I remember one of the reports as I've been paying a little bit more attention to this, one of the reports, they were, this was a white man. He referenced the movie Gattaca. I don't know if people have seen it or not, but it I think came out in like the 90s. And so you have like designer babies, if you want to think like CRISPR. That's what they were thinking about in the 90s. Like that's when it'll be, and that'll be widespread. Like everybody who has a child, they'll go to the clinic and, whatever you want. If you want the child to be really smart, run really fast, whatever, we'll, go in, tinker with the genetics, and there you go. And they have one child who does not get this done, who is just naturally born, and it shows, how his quality of life is lower because of that, and how he has to struggle to try to make his way, even as a white man in this society. But he was saying that he thinks it could be way worse than that. He just wasn't using the term white supremacy, but he was saying, given the current disparities that you already have, all of this technology could just drastically exacerbate that. It's just a lot to process from a lot of different ways, and even from a counter-racist perspective, like thinking about this technology. Wow, how can some of these things be used to counter racism? I think we were talking about on the program the recording devices that they have out right now. Like, it is amazing. Like if you work on a job and they don't allow you to have cell phones, no problem. They got MP3 pens, disk drives, like all kinds of little gadgets, glasses, everything where you can record. It'll be crystal, and you'll be able to use it whatever you need. They got watches and everything. We've talked about a lot of these little gadgets. I think those tactical pens, I think they were designed. One of the white people, when I was watching the videos after I got mine, he said this was designed environments where you can't take a weapon. They don't allow that. They will allow a pen. You can get down with this pen. Like the advances are just absolutely stunning. Like they have a lot of videos from South by Southwest. You can go online and just browse through, check out some of the content. Like I would encourage, particularly if you have children. Like I'd make no mistake. I think in 25 years, I suspect a lot of the people on this line likely will be around in 25 years. We hope, and in good health, and maybe we'll have solved this problem. But in 25 years, a lot of us will still be here. It's going to be radical, the difference just with, the advances and what have you. For your children, I can't even imagine what things could look like, 50, 75 years, what it's going to look like. So I would encourage, be talking about it, be talking about this with your children. It is absolutely stunning. And hopefully, like I said, we can use our brain computer, be inspired by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, apply some black self-respect, and see if we can use some of this technology to help us solve the problem. White people. But I think I'll save the clip. I will save it for that program because I'm excited, and I think we'll probably be able to get that done in the next 7 days. Everybody satisfied, right? Think anybody else had comments they were going to share? Anybody have commentary?
Have you heard really quick?
Heard both of you.
Hello? Oh, go ahead. Okay, so just real quick, I've attended a South by Southwest. I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago, 2 or 3 springs ago, and I attended the technological side, very interesting conversations, very interesting displays, but the aspect of South by Southwest that really intrigued me was the music. And I attended a few rap concerts there. I saw, what was that, A$AP Rocky and the whole A$AP mob and everything. And the thing that really struck me about the whole affair was the fact that it largely consisted of white Texans screaming the N-word really, really loud and staring at black people in the face. And then also, I attended South by Southwest with a friend of mine or an associate of mine who had dreadlocks. And the racism there was really, really plain spoken and in your face. I remember there was one time we were crossing the street and they had a crossing guard who looked like the Marine from the old 1990s Dragon commercial. He looked like extra bald, extra serious, extra Marine-like. And I remember we approached this stop. We were at the crosswalk first, but he held his hand out to us. He let two cars pass, then he let a white couple pass, and then he let us cross the street. And we looked at each other, my associate and I, and we both had to assure ourselves that we had just participated in a very, or we were just victims of a very racist act. And I don't know, South by Southwest, I never went back afterwards, and I don't think I've attended a live rap concert since.
I feel you. Living in the Pacific Northwest, that I have not had that experience, but I knew intuitively that I would not enjoy any sort of performance, music, otherwise, if it's going to be a largely white audience. That I didn't even have an understanding of racism, but I certainly now at this point, yep, that's about exactly what I would imagine that sort of environment to be, and probably intoxicated white people. I don't know about South by Southwest, but that wouldn't surprise me either. The other black male who spoke up simultaneously, were you going to comment as well?
Yeah. Real quick, I don't know if you heard that they had the car Tesla they put out last year. They were trying to have the first vehicle that could drive itself, but I guess it has to get approved through like a certain commission. So they disapproved it because they said that the people that are behind the wheel weren't going to be attentive to what's actually going on the road. And the people at Tesla said that's the whole purpose, for you to be able to say wherever you want to go, and it take you to wherever you want to go. So they pushed that back. It was supposed to release last year, and I heard that they tried to push it out this year again, but it got denied the second time. Also, I have a smartwatch, what they call a quote-unquote smartwatch. This thing, it tracks my sleep. It tracks how many gallons of water I drink per day, or cups. It tracks my steps, and certain other habits like heart rate, different workouts. It literally knows certain things that you're doing. If you're running, it knows. If you're walking, it knows. If you're going up the stairs, it knows exactly what's going on. So I guess it's like the gift and the curse. And also I think you said the virtual reality dating. I read an article on that, and I actually seen a picture. I can't remember exactly where I saw it, but they do have something where it's like an analog controller. If anyone ever played games online, where you can use that controller to actually penetrate whoever is on the opposite side of the computer or wherever else you're logged into. And yeah, they just have some weird stuff coming out with technology. Also, I've seen something where, I don't know if you guys are familiar, sorry about the noise in the background, I'm on a plantation. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the vending machines. But I heard that they were trying to produce a vending machine where you can customize doll babies, and you can produce it right there. But I haven't heard any more about that since like 2015, and that's pretty much it.
I hadn't heard about the customized dolls, but my suspicion everything could be, or I won't say everything, but a lot of things could be customized by, 15, 20 years. That could be the case. I mean, they've been talking about that for a while, that could be tremendously accelerated just as the technology continues to grow by leaps and bounds. Any other comments folks wanted to make sure they got in before we get ready to wrap things up? Again, we will be here tomorrow. Workplace racism. We again had a lot of people who wrote in. If you want to email, if you have suggestions, if you've had problems, if you have observations, certainly if you have figured out some things to solve problems, to get white people to back up off of you on the job, you just get your promotions and everything is fine. Definitely, we need those suggestions, what you have done or what you've said to stay out of trouble. But we'll be here tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for workplace racism. Any other comments folks want to get in?
Yeah, real quick. Speaking of Tesla, there was a report recently that a victim of racism filed a discrimination lawsuit against Tesla, alleging that he was called the N-word to his face frequently, and he was subject to a number of racist comments and racist treatment, and he's currently on medical leave. And I just wanted to note something about Tesla is that its, I guess, owner and CEO and founder is Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is a white man from South Africa. I believe he is old enough to have paid black people in bubblegum. So understand that if you're wondering about who's in control of the future and who is doing what, it doesn't surprise me that Tesla is home to racist incidences and racist treatment of its factory workers and all workers and its staff. And the founder is a white middle-aged South African who grew up in apartheid South Africa. So that's just something to note about one of the, racists that are trying to control the future. Thank you.
That's Thomas in New York Sky, getting his spaceships together. We're going to practice white supremacy in other galaxies. Elon Musk. But yeah, that's, again, what I mean. Whole different world, whole different universe, 25 years down the road. Maybe not even that long. Unless that is it. We are set.
And the people who are programming these technologies that know machine learning technology and Internet of Things technology and all sorts of embedded coding, a good number of those people are non-white individuals from so-called developing nations, India being one of the most abundant sources of this talent. So, that anybody can learn how to code. I just want to say that. So that might be the key to the future.
Amen. Learn as much as you can about, learn as much as you can about everything. Definitely encourage that. That will help us regardless in solving the problem of racism and white supremacy. Again, we'll be here tomorrow for Workplace Racism. If you have guest suggestions, if you have problems finding something in the archives, any other confusion, feel free to drop an email and we'll try to get your problem resolved promptly. Compensatory calling will be on Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and we'll be here on Friday, debut study session for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s partner, Coretta Scott King. She transitioned right at the beginning of 2006, but her autobiography just released with Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds. She's a black female acclaimed journalist. Just came out I think within the past couple of months, 2017, just came out, but we'll be starting that on Friday. Lots of great information, and obviously racism, white supremacy is a major theme of how she invested her life currency. So looking forward to that this Friday. With that, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope it's been a constructive investment of your Wednesday evening. I would again suggest sobriety. Under conditions of racism, white supremacy, white people are dangerous. That situation in New York with James Harris Jackson, the white supremacist, he was charged with terrorism. This week he killed an unarmed black male. Last week where he said he went to New York specifically to kill black people. You do not want to be under the influence and have people like that just roaming, and that's what it means to be white. He is not confused. He knows what it means to be white. He is an active race soldier practicing the religion of white supremacy. That being the case, we want to make sure that we are sober so that we can be clear thinking, so that we can be mindful of the danger that is around us. We can make great decisions to keep ourselves safe. A lot of us, if you're parents or if you're responsible for other people, hey, you do not want to be out on alcohol, tobacco, anything else that they come up with, any other narcotics, so that you are not able to make phenomenal decisions to keep yourself safe. White people are super dangerous. That's white people with a badge or without. With that, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. Special consideration, our prayers, thoughts for Pam, Trojan Horse Publications. She had a family member that passed away just this week. So we ask everyone if you could send your thoughts, prayers, condolences to Pam and her family. Wishing them strength. Know they're having a tough time. Context of White Supremacy signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.